Hey everyone, Tom Stimulis with True North Group, and we are here for our Tuesday Facebook Live, which is sponsored by Virginia's Small Business Development Center. So today we're going to talk about fines. Now, a lot of times I get pushback from a lot of smaller and medium businesses that they're just not important enough. That criminals aren't going to target them, that they don't have anything of value. And unfortunately, the only real fines we hear about are the ones that are going to generate news or generate clicks for, mainstream media. You don't hear about all the other fines. And what I really wanted to emphasize today is that regardless of your size, depending on your business, and in your industry, there is the likelihood that if you experience a breach, that there is a potential that you're going to receive a fine. And a lot of that has to do with, negligence and whether that negligence is willful. So a couple of the really big industries that you need to pay attention to are in the medical profession. So if you're a covered entity or if you have a business associate agreement with a covered entity, you're subject to HIPAA and the Insurance Portability and Protection Act. And what that really means is that you have to protect the protected health information. Additionally, if you are in any type of commerce or even e-commerce in that you accept credit cards. Now, you can defer a lot of that responsibility by outsourcing it, but there are a lot of people who have chosen not to outsource it. And you're regulated by PCI or the payment card industry. And that determines based off of how many credit cards that you do or how many credit cards you process. If you're in the financial financial industry, and that could be whether you are a bank or a lending institution of some sort, or if you're a financial advisor. It also has to do with where you do business, because each state may have different requirements. So an example, I'll cover that in a second, but and if you're in insurance, you have a lot of regulatory requirements that you have to maintain. And that's whether you're a single broker or whether you are a large insurance company. And as I said, depending on where you do business, in the state of New York, there is the NYDFS, which is a regulatory agency in New York that a lot of organizations have to comply with to do business in New York. And that's over and above whether it be insurance or the FFIEC or the SEC for federal and for investing and things like that. Now, a couple things that I wanted to talk about really was, we're going to start with the payment card or PCI compliance or non-compliance for that matter. Now, if you do level 2, 3, or 4, they break it out from level 1 down to level 4, and the category that you fall into is based off of the number of financial transactions that you do each year. Most organizations will fall into levels 2, 3, and 4, which allow you to self-assess. And every year you fill out some information, talking about security, who's responsible for it, other things like that. And then hopefully, you have all of your controls in place to protect you. If by chance that you do or that you are breached, then you run into the situation of, compliance. And the way PCI does it is that they charge a fine per month out of compliance. So an example would be if you were out of compliance, and this is based off of the investigation that they're going to do if by chance you have a breach. But if they determined that you were out of compliance for 2 months, then they can charge you between $5,000 and $10,000 for each month that you were out of compliance. If by chance you're out of compliance for 7 or more months, they can charge you between $50,000 and $100,000 per month for each month that you were out of compliance. That can have a significant impact on our abilities. And then additional with that is that they can revoke your ability to accept credit cards. And think about that. Think if your business had to go to all cash. It would be most likely devastating to most businesses that deal with that. So it's important that you understand what your PCI compliance is. It's even more important that you address any shortcomings that you may have in your environment. Like I said, you outsource a lot, but the thing to keep in reminder is that you can delegate responsibility, but you cannot abdicate responsibility. And that means that regardless, you're going to be ultimately responsible, whether you outsource it or not. You have to make sure that your providers are doing what they're supposed to do. So now on another aspect of it, let's talk about HIPAA. HIPAA is been around since I think 2001 actually, and it's evolved. And I talked about there's covered entities and then there's business associate agreements. So a hospital, a doctor, a lab, that would be considered a covered entity, and they will have requirements that if you do business with those covered entities. So if you are a managed service provider and you provide IT support to any covered entity, you would most likely have to sign a BAA or a business associate agreement, which means that you are also held accountable for protection of that health information. There are a number of incidents on an annual basis, and a couple that I want to kind of just refer to, and this is all covered under Health and Human Services and the OCR, the Office of Compliance, so it's all publicly available information. So I'm not calling out, but I'm just talking about there was a company called Aon Clinical Laboratories out of Georgia. And back in May of 2021, they were fined $25,000 for a failure to apply to the HIPAA security rule. And then a doctor, Stephen Porter out of Utah, was fined back in March of 2020 $100,000 for violating the HIPAA security rules. There are a number of other companies that are small in size, similar to ones that we have all around Virginia, Maryland, DC, that would fall into this category where if they were identified. And the way HIPAA works is it's really kind of interesting because HIPAA breaks it down into 4 different categories. So if it's a category that or violation that you were unaware of, they will hold you one way. If there's a violation and it goes all the way up to category 4, and category 4 is a violation of a HIPAA rule that was constituting willful neglect, all right, where no efforts have been made to correct the violation in a reasonable time frame. So that could be something as simple as encrypting your laptops, because that's a requirement in HIPAA to protect that data. So if you were to have a category 4 vulnerability or violation, which means that you knew, and they do their investigations and they're very methodical about that, but if they identify that you knew or you should have known that you had an issue with your protection related to that patient or PHI, protected health information, they're going to fine you a minimum of $50,000, all right, per violation. Now that could mean hundreds of thousands of dollars or millions of dollars, right? Now, of course, there's a lot of back and forth about whether you knew or what you could have done, but really what they're looking for is neglect. There are things that they're like, well, you could have never known about that, but they're still going to fine you. They're still going to fine you $100 minimum per violation, up to a maximum of $50,000 for a category 1 violation. And that minimum fine per violation is usually associated to records. All right. So if it's 10 records, it's $1,000. All right. If it's 100 records, it's 1,000 records. Most doctors have a lot of records. They don't just have 10 clients. So something to keep in mind with that as well. As small business owners, we have leadership responsibilities to make sure that we are doing what we need to do to protect this critical information that we're using to run our organizations. All right. So there's good to have measures, but a lot of our organizations, a lot of our businesses are fall under some type of regulatory. every state in the union has a requirement for businesses to report cyber breaches. So if you have a cyber breach, you are required by state law in Virginia, Maryland, DC to report that violation. They are now making it more and more stringent for municipalities and for state agencies to report, but businesses are already required to report. And if you don't report these and they identify that that you had it and you knew about it, that's even worse. And I'm not trying to do the whole gloom and doom. What I'm trying to talk about here is that I want people to understand that it's not just Aetna, it's not just Marriott, it's not just Equifax that are going to get fined. It's anyone who has the responsibility to protect information, especially regulated information, like I said, financial, medical, e-commerce. They're going to hold us to the same standards. Now, our breaches may not be as significant because it might only be 1,000 records as opposed to 1,000,000 records, but that's 1,000 records of your patients or of your customers, and they expect us to protect that information to the best of our abilities. So keep in mind that, you know what, we can't fly under the radar anymore. If you are doing business online or on the internet, then we all have a responsibility to protect that information. We have a responsibility to do our due diligence, and if we are found to be neglected or we've neglected our responsibilities, these regulatory organizations are going to hold us accountable and may actually fine us for that type of neglect. And I can't speak for everybody, but whether you're hit with a $10,000 or $100,000 fine, that may have a significant impact on whether you're going to be able to stay in business and provide those services to the customers or to the patients that have come to rely on you. So keep that in mind. As always, if you have any questions about your industry or regulatory requirements that you may be held to, please reach out to us at the Sbdc. You can set up a one-to-one with any of our advisors. If it's related to cybersecurity, you can set up a one-to-one with me. All of this is at no cost to our customers or our clients within the Sbdc. So please have a great rest of your Tuesday, and we will see you next week for a new Facebook Live.